Meanwhile, of course, the 2020 election cycle is heating up consistently as we're closing in ever more closely to the November election. And gosh, it's such a topsy-turvy environment. What are we to make of it all? Where do things stand right now? And how about some of the controversies between Joe Biden and Donald Trump running for re-election as president of the United States? Let's talk about it all with Ruben Navarrette, good friend of the show, syndicated columnist, rejoining us on Jimmy at the Crossroads. Ruben, my friend, welcome back.
Good to be with you. Thanks, Jimmy.
Good to have you, my friend. So let me just ask a broad question right out of the gate. Where does this horse race stand now that we are, September, October, November, about 3 months away from Election Day, with ballots going out in just a matter of weeks in some states?
Right. Yeah. So the conventional thinking before 2016 would have been that this is really Joe Biden's race to lose. So many polls this close to the election showing him as the front runner. President Trump can't seem to get out of his own way, continues to compound his mistakes and confound his critics and supporters alike. This would all be Joe Biden's to lose. However, this all changed in 2016 because, as you'll recall, Hillary Clinton had a lock on the election if you were to believe the polls. So I think the Trump supporters have reason not to get too worried or worked up because the polls have been wrong before. Trump voters have a habit of not telling pollsters what they really intend to do and just they want to do when they get in the polling booth. And also beyond that, there's also this sense that it's hard to beat something with nothing, and Joe Biden has his flaws and concerns that he generates even among supporters. So if turnout and the Biden voters don't turn out as expected, then we could be looking at a re-election for Donald Trump. It's still, as they say, the nickel's still in the air. We don't know how it's going to turn out.
Yeah, well, what's so striking too about Biden is the way that he's been running his campaign, and they're not really hiding this. I mean, he may be hiding in his basement, but they're not hiding why he's predominantly hiding in his basement and not doing interviews very much because they don't want to put him out there, especially because, look, I mean, the guy seems like he has cognitive issues, perhaps some form of dementia going on because of the way in which he forgets things, and it's just consistent and nonstop. And I think that they want to just let President Trump keep speaking and saying things that just get him attention and make people scratch their heads about President Trump, and keep Joe Biden hidden in his basement away from prying eyes as much as possible.
Right. These two people are remarkably similar when you think about it. They're older white males in the 40s and 50s. They have a habit of saying the wrong thing, particularly about race. They both have a habit, Trump and Biden, of saying whatever pops in their head. They have no filter. If you take offense, that's really your problem. Joe Biden really has no problem talking to a black radio personality host and saying, if you don't support me, you ain't black. Doesn't even occur to him that might be offensive. Likewise, all the various things that Trump has said over time, Mexicans are rapists and criminals, doesn't even occur to him that somebody could take offense. And if you do, hey, that's your problem. So these two folks were separated at birth, Joe Biden and Donald Trump. They are one and the same. And cognitive decline, it doesn't discriminate. It happens in the best of families and in both political parties. There are plenty of folks out there like Peggy Noonan, my friend at the Wall Street Journal, who called Donald Trump a crazy man. She said our choices in 2016 were between a crook, Hillary Clinton, or a crazy man, Donald Trump. So if this is going to be decided on cognitive ability, oh boy, Jimmy, it's a toss-up.
Well, see, here's the thing, though. When it comes to the way in which Biden speaks and Trump speaks in this cognitive question, I think Trump, to me, it seems like he's there. He's just not a linear thinker. He's all over the map in terms of when he jumps from one thing to another. I know some people like that who are very similar when they're speaking and talking about things. He just is not sequential. It's all over the map sometimes, whereas Joe Biden, I mean, there are things where you watch him and when he's forgetting basic names or where he is and what have you, that to me is a little more striking about the idea of cognitive decline.
Here's where Trump is broken cognitively. It used to be just that, and this is what you hear from his supporters. Why waste time punching down on Twitter? If you're the president of the country and the leader of the free world, do you really have to get into a Twitter fight with every celebrity and movie star who comes along? Do you really have to be? It's not cute anymore. Oh, I once attacked Rosie O'Donnell. He attacks everybody on Twitter from Hollywood. Sometimes he thinks he still lives in Hollywood. So that's a problem. going after Jeff Sessions as he did in a very personal way after he picked Sessions. He built this whole resume about I pick great people. He fires them and then he degrades them and humiliates them and insults them. Whether it's Tillerson or Kelly, most recently John Bolton. Jimmy, you and I haven't spoken about that. I've been on your show since the Bolton thing happened. One minute John Bolton is this great person, a darling of the conservative right. Then he has a falling out with Trump, and suddenly now Trump says, "Oh, he's the worst person in the world. I can't believe he was an idiot." And so problem. This is not just Trump being kind of blunt and glib. He has a complete disconnect to the fact that he's the one hiring these people.
Yeah. Well, something about, by the way, speaking of John Bolton, it was 2016, I think it was, or maybe it was 2017, that I introduced Bolton at the Western Conservative Summit when he was a featured speaker at the major conservative conference that takes place west of the Mississippi or outside the Beltway, which is
Did he strike you as a squishy liberal? Did John Bolton strike you as a squishy liberal who doesn't
Bolton
like the Republicans
strikes me as a neocon through and through on foreign policy matters. Like he really does have his core beliefs in those areas.
I agree.
As to the political dynamics and other things, I didn't get enough of a one-on-one to kind of suss that out, but I do believe that he is a genuine hawk on national security issues, to be sure. But your point about tweeting, more and more I do see conservatives who are saying, like myself, who are supportive of President Trump and his re-election bid and say, we need him to stop the tweeting because now it's getting too much. But especially, even if he was doing as much tweeting as he was last year, it would still be bad because he's running in a re-election fight. And the issues now are more serious with coronavirus, COVID-19, with the civil unrest and so forth than we were seeing last year.
Right. I mean, he got into a Twitter fight with Jim Acosta. Here's a great example about how Donald Trump and Joe Biden are the same person. Donald Trump decided to spend the day attacking Jim Acosta at CNN, saying, "Oh, you're a fake reporter," because Acosta accused him of not understanding the coronavirus. Okay, so that's the big fight. I want to see that, right? And then I turn over to Joe Biden. I flip the channel. And I got Joe Biden, who's asked by an African-American journalist, has he been tested for cognitive decline? And Joe Biden says, what a ridiculous question. That would be like me suspecting you were using drugs. And so I'd ask you, are you a junkie? So let me get this straight. On the one hand, you have, let's see, Trump picking a fight with a reporter. You have Biden accusing a reporter of being a junkie. Nobody is talking about the other guy. They're all fighting reporters. It's really hard to make the argument that these two people aren't much more similar than they are different.
Ruben Navarrette, again, our guest, syndicated columnist here at Jimmy at the Crossroads. So in terms of Joe Biden, I mean, look, he's said a lot of things. You mentioned, referenced the "you ain't black" comment and "are you a junkie?" This is not the first time. You go back 2008 cycle in that time period when he was talking about you go up to a Dunkin' Donuts and a 7-Eleven, you have to have a slight Indian accent, that kind of thing. This is not new for Joe Biden. How do the race issues, do you think, play out of Biden versus Trump? I mean, for those who are looking at both and saying, hey, I'm seeing some of these, at a minimum, questionable racial things, is it a wash in 2020?
For the last 5 years, I've chronicled 10 to 20 different instances where Donald Trump has said something racist about Latinos. I think Donald Trump, if he's not racist against Latinos, he at least knows how to speak racism. He is fluent in the nature of racism and the language of racism. If you are anti-Latino, Trump is your guy. At the same time, with Joe Biden, if you have problems with African Americans, I think you found your guy. Because Joe Biden, while maybe he's a racist, maybe he's not, I don't know. I'll say the same thing I said about Trump. Joe Biden is fluent in the language of racism as relates to African Americans. And in my column today, I detail at least 20 different instances going back to the Anita Hill hearings where Joe Biden has constantly said the wrong things when it comes to African Americans and dealt with them in a very insulting, sometimes racist manner. And the liberal media just shrugs it off and says, oh, that's Joe. He's crazy Joe. He says he's crazy stuff. But again, apples to apples, Trump to Biden. You got two white guys who grew up in the 40s. They're both in their 70s. Each one has a problem with one group of racial minorities. They just happen to have problems with different groups.
So let me ask you, as we're wrapping up here, Ruben Navarrette, about the conventions. I mean, this is a very strange year because we're coming upon within the next couple of weeks the Democratic National Convention and then the Republican Convention.
Yeah.
Mostly electronic over over the internet, doing something like we're doing here right now. So what do you make of the convention dynamics, and also who do you think Joe Biden picks for his vice president?
So I wonder what it does to our psyche that we've spent so much time on Zoom, you, me, and all America. This has now become very natural to us. If you now go from this conversation you and I are having, or the 10 to 20 Zoom calls people have every day when they're in business, and now we sub in, this other Zoom event, which is a Democratic or Republican convention, I used to have. Even if people tune in, it'll just become like another Zoom call for them. They won't be able to get the full effect. And certainly that's going to hurt both candidates. In terms of vice president, I would hope, I'm working on a column at the moment for USA Today, I hope that Joe Biden does not choose Kamala Harris. I think that would show that Joe Biden isn't paying attention to the police reform movement that we're all going through at the moment. If he goes with Kamala the cop, it seems like it's going to be either Susan Rice or Kamala Harris. At this point, Susan Rice would be a better choice, at least on that score. Not a perfect choice, but a better choice than Kamala Harris.
Yeah, it's interesting. I tend to think both of them have some very key vulnerabilities that we'll see.
Absolutely.
Whoever ends up being the nominee, and it could work to President Trump's favor in his reelection. But one thing I think about the rallies and about the conventions in terms of the candidate that it hurts the most is Donald Trump. I went to that rally in Colorado Springs, you recall, back in February.
Yeah.
And it was like Donald Trump wanted to put on the best show on earth. And you wanted to leave excited and enthused and ready to go tell your friends, hey, you have to go support Donald Trump, because the adrenaline just takes a long time to go away, and it's a memorable experience. He's not able to do that because of the coronavirus pandemic.
Yeah, it's a very good point. He's a much better performer than Joe Biden would have been. So once you take away the performance aspect of this, it's going to hurt Trump more than Biden. Ultimately, Biden was not going to do himself any favors, Jimmy, by appearing at this convention. No favors. So if anything, this move toward a more Zoom-oriented approach might just benefit Biden, might make it a wash as far as both are concerned. But you're right, Trump's the better performer, and he's going to miss the show.
Final question for you, Ruben Navarrette, syndicated columnist. The United States Senate is in play in very strong ways for the Democrats. In some of these states, there are indications that Republicans are vulnerable in more places than like Colorado and Maine, for example, with Senator Cory Gardner in Colorado and Senator Susan Collins in Maine, just two of the examples of instances where we already knew that Republicans had a rough road in order to hold those seats. What about the Senate? Is there a possibility that is notable for the Democrats to control the Senate?
Yes, there's now a possibility that Republicans can lose the Senate, but it's a new possibility. It's something I wouldn't have said a week ago. It goes down to the short attention span Americans have. It doesn't matter what the Republicans in the Senate did wrong 6 months ago. What matters is what they're doing wrong today. And what they're doing wrong today is failing to pass unemployment benefit extensions for people who are unemployed. 40 million Americans at one point during the pandemic unemployed. And you have senators who are making the argument that you can't pay people to stay at home and not work. To heck with that. I've been paying senators to stay at home and not work for ages. It doesn't seem to bother them. As taxpayers, we pay people not to work in Congress. So this will ultimately cost them dearly.
Well, we don't have time to delve into that. I'm sure we will down the line. But I will say this, that I would prefer to pay senators and congressmen more money in order to stay at home and do less overall.
Well, we're halfway there.
In Colorado, we have a 120-day constitutional limit on the legislative session. I would like to see something like that on Congress so they could be doing a little less harm to the American people. Ruben Navarrette is syndicated columnist. Always good to check in with you, my friend. Thanks for taking the time today.
Thank you, Jimmy.
Once again, good friend, syndicated columnist Ruben Navarrette rejoining us here on Jimmy at the Crossroads. Thanks for watching this clip of Jimmy at the Crossroads. Don't miss more engaging, intelligent talk. Subscribe today to the Jimmy at the Crossroads YouTube channel. You do not want to miss our live show. Thanks for your support.
I got Jimmy at the Crossroads, making sense out of no sense. Yeah.